The most random thing happened today. You were just standing in line at the grocery store and you met Richie Rich. It's the adult version of Richie Rich, but you met him today in the grocery store. A big money prospect, and time is ticking to turn this guy into a client. So now you have high hopes for this prospect. And to me, if you are meeting a big money client, that person doesn't deserve their information just scribbled onto a legal pad and maybe lost somewhere, or maybe some coffee spills and that information is lost forever. So what I would suggest to do, as soon as you meet somebody that's important to you, maybe it's not even a prospect. Maybe it's a center of influence or a connector. I suggest to always go into the CRM and add that person in. And how do you do that? My favorite way is to click on this plus sign in the top right-hand corner. So in the top right-hand corner of your screen, you're going to have this plus sign that's honestly going to follow you no matter where you go into the CRM. So you'll notice I just clicked on the seminars page on the left-hand side, but I still have this quick add option available for me to click on. So if you did just meet somebody, you want to go ahead and click on that quick add icon. Now, I do also want to mention that on the mobile app, you are able to quickly add in clients as well. So if you're on the go, let's say you're in the grocery store, you meet this person and you're really eager, you could just pull out your cell phone right then and there and start to do this process as well. But for the desktop version, if you're using, your CRM on redtailtechnology.com, you're going to always click on that plus sign in the top right-hand corner and then choose to add in a contact. And as soon as you choose to add in a new contact, you could go ahead and choose to add in an individual, business, association, trust, or union. Now, in this case, I met Richie Rich today. So he's a person. So I'm going to go ahead and select on individual. And now, at the very least, for you to add in a contact record, you are going to need to type in a first and a last name, because sometimes that's the only information that you are able to gather on that prospect. So that is the bare minimum that you need to keep. But the purpose of this session is to give you guys best practices. So I'm here to tell you that you have a third item that you can keep on this person as well. So if I shoot down to the bottom of the screen, there is going to be an area for your contact details. And if you know this person's first and last name, then you also know a third item about that person, and that is their status. So if you ever joined us for a clean data webinar session, you know that we preach the importance of using status as the very highest level of client classification. So I suggest to customize this status list so it will classify your contacts out at the very highest level. So think as simple as active client, prospect, and maybe even business. Or maybe it's going to be active and just prospect. Those are two different types of clients you're going to have in your database. So you want to go ahead and separate your contacts out at that very highest level. So for this exercise, I'm going to go ahead and choose prospect because I just met Richie at the grocery store and I want to go ahead and get his accounts over. I know he has billions of dollars. So I'm going to go ahead and designate this person as a prospect, and hopefully I can move them to a client down the line of this series. So at the very least, like I said, you're going to know their first and last name and you're going to know their status. But please go through the screen and try to fill out as much information as possible. Especially with technology nowadays, you can find a lot of information online. Maybe I want to use LinkedIn as a resource and type Richie Rich on LinkedIn and find his employer there. Or maybe he's just that famous that if I type in his name in Google, his business information is going to type in or is going to pop up for me. So go ahead and gather in as much information as possible. And we could go ahead and move down the screen and highlight those fields that I think are most important. So employer, that's something that I would suggest to fill out. That way, if you get more clients at Rich Industry, you could go ahead and go to that employer page and see a physical list of all of those clients. Family name is also something that's going to be important. Family name, I want you to think of this as the label on the envelope. So if you were going to send Rich and his family a correspondence, what would you want it to say? Would you want it to say the Richies, the Richie family, Mr. Richie, whatever you would want it to say, you could type it in there directly. And then you could go ahead and put in spouse information. I would definitely suggest adding in an address and designating it as primary. Like I mentioned earlier with technology, you can even bookmark the United States Postal Service on your internet browser. And then whenever you're going to look up a client or you want to verify their address, you could type in that address into the USPS.com website and it'll go ahead and verify that address for you. So that's a best practice tidbit. Go ahead and use it if you find it fit, and make sure you're using that primary designation. But scrolling down here, I'm going to go ahead and talk about category as well, because we know that Richie is a prospect right now, but I even have the ability to rank that prospect out further. Maybe they're a cold prospect, maybe they're a hot prospect, maybe they're a lost prospect. I could go ahead and designate that here. And in this case, I'm so excited about meeting Richie Rich, so he's going to be a hot prospect. I'm going to try to spend all my time on this to go ahead and get this business closed. And the more information you have, the better, but I understand that sometimes you don't always have that information. So for right now, we're going to go ahead and click Save Contact, and it's going to go ahead and add this person to the database and collect all of that information I added on that first screen. Now, I talked about adding in the status and the category for these contacts that you're adding in. So your next question is probably, how do I customize those lists? How do I get prospect in there? Or how do I get lost in category? And that's a great question. If you want to customize anything in Redtail with a drop-down menu, you always want to click on your name in the top right-hand corner and go to Manage Your Account. So click on your name and go to Manage Your Account. And all the way at the bottom, this area is exclusive to admins only, but if you select on Manage Database List, you could go ahead and choose the list on the right-hand side that you want to customize, and you could go ahead and build this list. Now, as a bonus for attending this session, you have a database list sample provided to you. So within the GoToMeeting question, or within the GoToMeeting box, there is going to be a handout, and it's going to have all of the lists that are within our trainer database defined, and it's going to provide some samples. So that way you can take that list and pick and choose what you want to implement into your system, and you can see if the list that we have that aren't really reinventing the wheel for you will work in your office. So definitely use that list that is provided. And if I want to customize that category drop down, I could just click on categories to find that there. Now that you have this contact entered into the system, you have this contact classified as a prospect. Now, the whole point of client classification is so that you can quickly cast a net over your groups later. So let's say later this week, you're hosting a really exclusive event at a nice steakhouse, and you want to invite all of these really interesting prospects that you've met. Then what you would want to do is go ahead and run a search so you can cast a net over those prospects and invite them to your steakhouse event. So to do that, I'm going to click on Contacts on the left-hand side. And when you click on Contacts on the left, you're going to want to select on Advanced Search at the very top. And now we're going to go ahead and define our search criteria. So I specifically want to search for people that have that status set to prospect. So for the type of information I'm looking for a contact level data. So I'm going to select on contact. And then for field, I'm going to go down here to status because I want to look for those clients at the very highest level. I want to look for those prospects. So I'm going to set this equal to prospect, and we'll go ahead and run that search. And it looks like I have 31 records that meet the search criteria. So what I would do if I were you is I would click this button Save right next to Run. And I would save this quick list and name it, my prospect list. So that way I never have to run this search again. If I ever want to, excuse me, if I ever want to pull up my prospects later in the future, all I need to do is click on this recently viewed icon in the top right-hand corner. It looks like a person saying, help me or pay attention to me. And if you click on the tab here that says quick list, you could go ahead and find all of those lists you created. So you'll notice underneath P, I have my prospect list here that I had created. And I could go ahead and click on that and bring up that group again later in the future. So that's why I personally suggest to go ahead and use quick list. If you run a search and you're gonna use it again later, go ahead and save that search so that way you could just click on quick list and bring them up in the future. Now you'll notice that some of these contacts say cold, some of them even say lost. So you might consider narrowing down the search by the contact category. So that way you're not only inviting people who are prospects, but you're inviting people who are hot prospects because you think that they're really close to closing and signing on to your business. So I think that this would be a great list to invite to, that steakhouse event. And because I added Richie Rich as a hot prospect, he's down here already in this list. So I don't have to worry about hosting this event and him accidentally being left off. He is already going to be here because I set up those lists. And then when I added him to the system, I went ahead and marked him as that hot prospect. Now, we talked about adding a person, we talked about adding lists and creating lists, but upon meeting our prospect, I would still suggest to go to their contact record and add a note for more information. Because you'll notice this record is pretty naked, it's pretty blank, it just says hot prospect on the right, and that is it. So I would suggest to go to that prospects page once you add them and start adding in information. A great piece of information to add would be a note because we met Rich today, so we might as well explain that situation. So maybe, somebody looks at Rich down the line and they're like, how in the world did you meet Richie Rich in person? Then they can go to Richie's notes and see a detailed description of exactly how it happened. So I can go ahead and type it in here. All right, and just knowing some history about the movie, I'm just going to type in some details about our conversation and go ahead and add that in as well. All right, perfect. So I went ahead and put in as many details as possible. I said that I met him when I was standing in line at the grocery store. He mentioned something about his parents and them being missing and an inside job at the company. So I'm going to follow up with him tonight. So you go ahead and categorize this information. We can go ahead and use the note categories so that way later down the line if I want to pull up all of my notes that had to do with prospecting or had to do with meetings or important conversations, I could do that later. So I'm going to go ahead and choose create follow-up activity as well because you'll notice within the note details, I said that I want to follow up with him tonight because he kind of worried me about his conversation when we were in line today. So I just want to give him a call and make sure that everything is okay. So I'm going to go ahead and save this note. It's going to add that note to Rich's record and save it as a note for history, but it went ahead and opened up an activity. So now I can go ahead and schedule that date and time for me to call him. So I said that I want to call him later tonight. He seemed really busy and really startled, so I think somewhere around 6 p.m. is going to be good. And for this, you want to add in as many details as possible. So we can go ahead and use the type as our color coordination on our calendar, and we can use the category to pull up later. So there we go. I went ahead and I created this contact to the person, or I created this contact record. I added them to the system. I designated them as a prospect. I even created a quick list of all of my prospects. And then for best practice, I went into Rich's record. I added in a note so that I can have that detailed history. And I even added in an activity. So later tonight, I'm going to have a reminder to go ahead and call Rich and follow up on that phone call. Now, I might be adding a ton of notes down the line, and I might find that this note is the most important note in Richie Rich's history. And I want to make sure that it's locked up here at the very top of my screen for me to refer to always. So if I want to do that, I can click on action and I can select pin note. And what that's going to do is it's going to take this note from chronological order and it's going to lock it up here at the top. So even if I add in a new note, it's not going to add it above this one right here. It's going to add it below because this one will be locked up there for me to refer to forever. And if I don't want to refer to it anymore, I could just click on actions and remove that pin, and it would remove it from that, or it would remove it from the top and push it back into chronological order. So you might find that helpful as well. But other than that, that is it. He is in the system. Stay tuned because next week or in the next series, we're going to talk about adding Richie Rich to your secret step-by-step process that will win over any client, no matter who they are. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to our support team at 800-206-5030, and that's option 3 for support. But other than that, I want to thank you guys so much for your time today. We look forward to seeing you in the next event. Take care.